Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever part of the world you're in, whatever time zone you're in, a very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us. Local time in the UK, just gone 8 p.m. It's Saturday evening. I'm joined by a group of friends, and tonight we're going to be discussing the licensing shake-up by OFCOM. OFCOM have just released a document detailing the potential changes for the future, so we're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive on that. As usual, all of the other participating channels are linked in the description below, so please do take a moment to check out the other channels, and we will be live with you in just a minute. And we are live, and I noticed Chris in the top left has got there just in time. Good effort, Chris. So I think most people have already come across this channel before. We'll know the other guys. We do quite a bit of collaboration, but just for completeness, anyone who's just joining us, I like to try and go around the table and just do a quick 30-second introduction. So for completeness, my name is James. I do mainly SOTA wildlife flora fauna, mainly portable operations, but we do cover other aspects as well. And top left we have regular Chris, top right we have the other Chris, and bottom left Fraser, regulars on the channel. And we're very lucky this evening to have Jonathan M0JSX joining us, and
is it lucky or
American
just burdened
as well? Sorry, say that again.
Is it lucky or burdened?
I'd say lucky. It's always nice to get new people on the channel.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so let's get the introductions out of the way. So we'll start top left and just go around the screen. So if we start with Chris UKH, quick introduction for your channel.
Yeah, hi James. Can I just check my audio's okay?
Yeah, you're all good, Chris.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. I'm Chris. I'm 2E0 UKH, and I cover everything digital and analog. You know, I'm only in a block of flats, so it's a little bit limited. So I do mobile, and I've actually had some really good results. So, and thank you for the invite.
Well, thank you for joining us. And yeah, you've done some absolutely phenomenal stuff. You've done 10 meters to the States was mobile on some of the repeaters, and the one I really liked was your handheld to was it the Netherlands you managed to get from the coast?
Yeah, on 70 centimeters simplex, on a simplex frequency, UK to Netherlands, on a Chinese handheld on 5 watts rubber duck.
Just goes to show, even under limited circumstances, it's amazing what you can do. Yeah. Okay, so going around the table, let's bring in Chris, M0RSF.
Good evening, James. Thanks for having me on again. Good evening to the rest of the chaps as well. My YouTube channel, low power QRP and portable operation, Summits on the Air, the HEMA, Humps excluding Marilyn's Award, the Wainwrights, anything portable really. And I've been really good. Natalie and I were on holiday a couple of weeks ago up in Cumbria. It was the hottest June on record, and I actually made 4 videos. We managed to get 4 SOTA summits in. It was too warm the other days, and I've uploaded one a week instead of doing my usual thing of they're uploaded in a flash. Absolutely, come home, you know, James. They're on. These rumours about I have a helicopter I'm that quick at getting from my sword summit and getting the video online. So I've behaved, I've done really well.
Yeah, we've done a few collaborations where we've been about a week behind you getting the video out. Chris is just so quick at getting his videos edited. I don't know how he does it. It's literally got the video up within a couple of hours of the activation. It's
before I've got my boots off.
There was one occasion where his video was live before I'd even got home. So
Yeah.
that's how quickly he does it. And then bottom left, we have Fraser up in Scotland, flying the flag for Scotland tonight.
Yeah, good evening. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining James on the live stream. Yeah, I'm MM0EFI Fraser. If anyone watches my channel, I'll pretty much climb anything and do anything anywhere on the planet. And somebody even wants me to do a video on my Land Rover, so I might do that this year as well.
Yeah, because you got quite a big mast on that thing, haven't you? You did it for 145 Alive.
That's right. Yeah, it's
impressive setup.
It was a police command unit in the 1980s down in Hertfordshire. And we got it and turned it into a camper, and it's got this Clark pneumatic 50-foot mast built into it. You'd have a job to remove it. It's actually part of the vehicle. But it's I've hardly used the mast, to be honest with you, but it was brilliant for the 145 Alive event.
Yeah, absolutely perfect. And then finally, coming round to our special guest this evening, we've got Jonathan.
Yeah, good evening. Hello, I'm Jonathan M0JSX. I've also got a US call sign as well. And I do on my channel pretty much anything and everything, including operating and product reviews and news about amateur radio, which you may have seen my video about the OFCOM proposal.
And you also worked for Martin Lynch
in a previous life.
There,
yeah, no. So I left Martin Lynch and Sons in November of 2021. I left there. So I've been out of the game for just over 18 months or so, but still keep my toe in.
But nonetheless, as we're talking about the Ofcom license proposals, I really wanted to get Jonathan on tonight to get his, should we say, professional perspective, having actually worked in the industry as well. So that's one of the big reasons why I really wanted to get Jonathan on tonight. So before we kick off, I'll just have a quick look through the chat, see who's joining us tonight. So we got Dave is with us now. Dave, for those of you who are regulars, will know that Dave is usually on here with us. He couldn't make it tonight. Unfortunate circumstances. He's just sent me a video on the WhatsApp group. We got a little WhatsApp group going, and unfortunately he's stuck on a beach in Tenerife with a drink in his hand. So
how unfortunate.
Yeah, such terrible shame. But yeah, he's away on holiday, and I think it would have gone down very badly with the family if he'd blown the family out and joined us tonight.
James, you know what? The guy deserves a drink because I've suggested some soda summits for him in Tenerife. So he's going to have his work cut out once he starts climbing the hills over there.
So yeah, an honourable mention for Dave. He does a lot. He's also SOTA, Worldwide Flora Fauna, and a good friend as well in our WhatsApp group. We got Nick H with us. We got Andy Cowley. He shows up in every single live stream, just about everywhere. I have a bit of a running joke. I call him the Phantom of the live stream because everyone sees him, or everyone knows his name and his call sign, but nobody ever actually sees him or knows what he looks like. So
I've seen him.
The Phantom
I
of
have
the
seen
live
Andy
stream.
Cowley.
Wow, someone who's seen him.
Yes, he does exist.
I like Callum's theory on Andy Cowley that he's just a robot and he's Andy Cowley bot. I like that theory.
Oh, I like that. That's good, that one.
He's an AI.
And then we got G5STU. I was lucky enough to appear on his channel a few weeks ago. We did a bit of a collaboration. It was supposed to be a brief chat, and we ended up, I think we were talking to each other for about 2 hours. So he had his editing work cut out for him on that one, but he did whittle it down. We went pretty much across the whole board and discussed everything. And he's got a good piece of logging software as well he works with. So there we go. And he says it's not a certified ham radio live stream if Andy isn't there. Very true, very true. And then we got Darren and Steve with us as well. So good evening to you all. So before we kick off, I think we need to kick this off with a bit of a disclaimer. What we're talking about here is an Ofcom document that was released with, it's under consultation at the moment. So it's proposals as to how the licensing may or it's suggested it may change in the near future. So it's not actually come into force yet. And if and when, and I would suggest it's probably more when rather than if it does come into force, some of these things could change. So do not take what we're saying tonight as gospel, because it's not in force yet and it could well change. So there's a couple of rumours I want to dispel to start with. So whenever there's any kind of proposal like this, the first thing you always get is, oh, they're going to take more band spectrum away from us. Now, I've got the document on the laptop just down here, and Ofcom says, and I quote, "We are not proposing changes to the frequency bands available for amateur use in the UK." So crucially, we're not losing any band space on this. Personally, I don't know what the other guys think. I would have liked to have seen 40 metres extended more in line with America, because at the moment our band stops at 7.2 and 40 metres can be quite a crowded band. So I would have liked to have seen it extended, but that is not proposed to happen here. But I don't know what the other guys think on that.
Yeah, James, I would agree with you. It makes it very difficult for us in that tight. I mean, God, 20 years ago it was even tighter, wasn't it? I think it's 70. You could only go up to
yeah, true.
like
when I first got my license, it used to be 7.1. Yeah,
me too, yeah,
so
and then
they have extended it,
but it doesn't seem to make any difference. I mean, it is shared. If you go above 7.2, there is a lot of high-powered sort of international broadcast stations in there. But yeah, the other thing I think as well is 2 meters. There's that sort of NOV you can get for the 146 megahertz, and if they made that permanent, we'd be able to use the same radios as Americans would, which mean if you're traveling about the place, you know, the same radio would work, because their 2 meter setup's totally different to ours.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'll chip in at this point. So there's a reason that Ofcom potentially can't do anything with the band edges on 40 meters is because we're in the wrong ITU region. So because of us being in region 1, that allocation is basically set by the ITU. Now, Ofcom could, if they wanted to, change the band edge, but then they would have a lot of pressure from a lot of EU regulators because of changing the band edge, and therefore potentially hams causing interference to European broadcasters within that bit of spectrum. So that's why I don't think we're ever going to see Ofcom license us to go up to 7.3 megs. As for 2 meters, yes, they could. The American band goes up to 148 megs, so it would still be 1 meg short. And America does weird things with repeater shifts as well on 2 meters. Very odd in terms of directions.
Okay, yeah, because the band shift or the repeater shifts on 2 meters are quite narrow, aren't they? So you ever see videos or photos of some of the repeaters people have set up? The filters for them are absolutely massive.
Yeah, the cavities are huge, yeah.
It's ridiculous. So in terms of other things that quite often come up whenever a proposal comes up, there's always talk of charging for licenses. Again, Ofcom have categorically said, and it's on page 50 of the document if you want to read it, that there are no plans to charge for licenses. As the system currently stands, if you apply for a license online, it's free. I believe you can obtain a license through the post after passing your test, and I think it was a £20 charge for that. But as it stands, that is not changing. So that's perhaps the other rumour we should dispel as well. So, I mean, let's talk about the reasons for this. Ofcom say they want to. I think the whole point is they're just trying to make it more streamlined. They say our policy is to set license restrictions that are the minimum necessary to provide adequate protection against harmful interference. So I think one of the things they're trying to do is reduce some of the admin and I guess in some ways reduce some of the burden, make it a bit easier. Does that sound about right to you guys? I mean, they're certainly talking about lifting certain restrictions.
I think the overall takeaway from this document is that Ofcom are just trying to future-proof the hobby, maybe for the next 10 years, maybe for the next 20 years. And there's a lot of quite old language used in the current licensing conditions, which doesn't reflect amateur radio in 2020. Doesn't reflect amateur radio in 2010, regardless of 2023. So it's Ofcom just bringing the license up to date, and it's quite clear that the RSGB have had some influence in this document. How much, I don't know.
I think it's good that they did have that influence. I think it would have been
exactly so
a bit of a mess otherwise.
Well, it would be. So it's good that Ofcom are actually paying attention to amateur radio for once, and that they're proposing a document which, on the whole, I think we'd all agree with some of the, we'll disagree with some of the points, and say, well, why are they doing that? Or that's not quite how I would like it to be. But we can all agree that, on the whole, it's actually a pretty good document, and it's a pretty good set of proposals in my regard.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But
I think that in this modern world, somebody's put self-service, which was so it's David. It's put self-service as the key. Now that's happening everywhere. In the industry I work in, we've got people that don't have jobs anymore because we do everything self-service. We go online, we find an app, we go to an online help center. You type a word in, there's a smart self search engine, takes you straight to the policy or the procedure or whatever it is you need. And that's going to save Ofcom money. Amateur radio doesn't really make them any money, but whereas commercial radio does, selling bandwidth and spectrum makes them money. They want to just make amateur radio, I think, as simple as possible. And absolutely what Jonathan said, future-proof. 20 years ago, we didn't have these. We didn't have little Raspberry Pis and DV hotspots. So that's one of the things we'll probably talk about in a minute. But the hobby's got so fragmented now. There's so much digital stuff. If they started to try and regulate all that, I think it would just be impossible. And I think that's part of the reason they're trying to just streamline it and simplify it and make it self-service.
Okay, so what do we think of the proposal of only being allowed one call sign now? Because as it stands in the UK, there's 3 tiers of license, and until recently, I think they're changing it now. You had to work through each license step by step. So you had to do your foundation, then your intermediate, then your full. I don't know if it's come into force yet. I think they were going to bring in a direct route straight to full if you want to do it. I don't know if that's actually happened yet.
Yes, it has.
It has happened.
Yeah.
Okay. Because what they're now proposing is if you've got all 3 licenses or call signs, they're going to take your older licenses or call sign away from you, so you only have 1 call sign. Now, technically, my license, I've got all 3 licenses, and technically they're still valid, so I could still use my M3 call sign or my 2E0. Now, my personal feeling on that, this is one of the few things in this document I'm not too sure on. I can see why they've done it. They're obviously running out of call signs. They're trying to reduce the number of call signs being used so they can reissue them, and that's another point we can perhaps go on to in a minute. But in some ways, I managed to get, I was quite lucky with my 2E0. I managed to get my initials, so I do sometimes still use that call sign, and I kind of wanted to hold on to that call sign, but it's looking like I might lose that. But I don't know what you guys think about holding multiple call signs.
I think it's fair enough. We've got one, but like you say, we've all got an attachment to a certain call sign, and no one is forcing you to change call sign. And, under these new proposals, intermediate can change, can't it? To, is it MA or M9? But you're not forced to. You're not forced to. But if the advantages are worth it, then you can do it.
Yeah, I'm with you, Chris. Again, it's decreasing their burden of administration. I've got 3 call signs. Every couple of years I go on and revalidate them. And to be honest with you, I never used them. And in some ways, some people use different call signs to cheat at certain things. So, if I've got a friend that's on a SOTA summit and he's desperate for 4 contacts, I could probably give him the 4 contacts if I used a club call sign and my own 3 call signs. And then off he goes, but he's just spoken to the same person in the same place 4 times. And, some people do that with chasing DX and contests and all sorts of stuff. So, yeah, let's get rid.
Personally myself, I got rid of my foundation and my intermediate. I gave them up when I got the full call M0 RSF. I gave up. Are they looking to find a true reflection of how many radio amateurs we actually have in the UK? If people hold one call sign, then that's going to be a reflection of how many radio amateurs they are. I think
What a brilliant comment. Yeah.
I think you're bang on, Chris.
If people have got more than one, it might be expanding the figures. Are you with me?
I think you're absolutely right, Chris. And that was when I first read the proposal. That was the first thing that came to my head: is okay, Ofcom just want to know how many licenses there are. They want to know how many people have actually got a call sign. Because if you look at all of the figures that Ofcom publish for the number of hams there are in the UK, it's always based on the number of licenses issued. And yeah, I'm the same. I've still got my foundation intermediate call signs, which I can't remember the last time I used either one of them. But I think it makes absolutely perfect sense that those get stripped away from everybody like me who's held on to them. And that way they can have a true reflection of how many personal call signs there are. Obviously, there's still going to be a bit of discrepancy in terms of like club calls and things like that, but at least it gets that number down and gives a more accurate reflection of the number of license holders there are, rather than the number of licenses.
So what do we think of the proposal to reissue call signs after, I think it's after 2 years? Because the point that's I've read that's brought up quite a lot is if someone sadly passes away and goes silent key, then that call sign can be reissued after 2 years. Now, how's that going to affect things like, for example, a lot of us on here do SOTA, Summits on the Air, so how's that going to affect the SOTA website?
True.
And things like QRZ, you could put a call sign in, which you've just lawfully got, having just passed your test, and it could still refer back to someone who died just over 2 years ago. So
I hadn't thought that, James. All these databases and login programs, and they're going to be a different person. But obviously, we all know Tim G5TM. He's got an old call sign. A friend of mine, Ben GW4BML. He picked that because it's his initials of his family. That's a reissued call sign. So there's not much change to that, really, is there?
The difference is those amateurs who held those call signs probably passed away more than 2 years ago. Yeah. Probably 10, maybe 20 years ago. I don't know. I've not looked into it. So
but then
is that enough time for them to...
Since these databases, if you look at it, the SOTA program's been on the go for 20 odd years now. So, anybody that gets a call sign that's less than 20 years old and starts using it again would start, corrupting some data. And, Log of the World's been around for a while, EQSL, all of those things have all been around long enough now. So I suppose as amateurs and the people that run those software have to consider it. But yeah, I can understand why Ofcom are doing it, but I agree with you. I think 2 years is very, very short, even if it was 5 years.
I mean, it is reserved. If I'm 2E0 UKH, if I change, accept, if this goes through and I accept the high power and it is reserved, I could be M8 UKH. So it was mentioned in the papers that it is reserved. Did anyone see that?
Yes, your suffix, your last three letters, they've reserved them, haven't they?
Yes. Yeah. So that's encouraging. That's currently encouraging, yeah.
God forbid if folk should happen to Fraser up there in Scotland, God forbid. I'd like to take his call sign and instantly become a mountain goat.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of good points on the chat. Darren says, scrap all the call signs and give us all new ones, just to simplify it. And Irish Dave, obviously, he's saying that he finds the UK call sign allocation over complex. You got to think about, international stations that are working us. It is a lot more complicated working into the UK than working out, isn't it?
My counter to that is, what does it matter?
No, it's just a number and a series of letters.
Exactly. So, and this is the thing that I've always thought about when, if on the rare occasion that a station in the UK is the DX, because let's be honest, that never happens. But if that were to happen, for someone in the States, say, just working a UK call sign, what difference does it actually make in terms of what class of license they're talking to? Doesn't make
the problem I've had on a few occasions working the States, I've had American amateurs come over. They've looked me up on QRZ and I've been working portable on the SOTA Summit in Wales, and they've said, well, we can't find you on QRZ. Now, you can get around that by adding a second call sign with the Mike Whiskey 0 in there, because of course we have to change our call sign as we move around the UK. So if I went up to Scotland, I would have to be Mike 0 Golf Quebec Charlie, same as Fraser. So I think it does. I think most stations around Europe understand that, because we work them quite a bit. But I think the more DX stations, if you're doing SOTA Parks on the Air, Worldwide Flora Fauna, you can get quite a few Americans calling in, and I think that does confuse them, especially when they. I've had a few who've QSL'd me twice through the bureau because they're not sure whether to go through my Mike Whiskey call sign or my Mike 0 call sign. So I think it does cause a little bit of confusion, I think, for some people. As we say, how much does it matter, though?
Well, and that's the thing is, I think you're perfectly right in terms of the nations, in terms of, adding the regional secondary locator, which I'm sure we'll come on to later. But in terms of the actual class of license, it doesn't matter whether that's an M or a 2 or a G. Just harking back, I think the 2-year grace period is possibly slightly short in the case of someone being deceased. But what's worth noting is that we don't own our call signs. I don't actually own M0JSX. I have a license. I've passed an exam and I have a license issued by OFCOM in order to use M0JSX as a call sign. So
that is true.
I think it would be slightly odd to hear, a deceased relative's call sign back on the air. But actually, it's worth noting that it's not their call sign. It doesn't actually belong to them. It's just that they had a license to use that call sign.
Very true. Nonetheless, I think people still get attached.
They do. They do.
Signs,
yeah.
Rightly or wrongly.
No, and you're absolutely right. And I think the 2-year grace period. I think when I submit my reply in to the consultation, that'll be the one thing I'll say. I think the 2 years is slightly short in terms of a license being inactive. I think that it should be possibly 5 years. Probably would be a good balance. But I think that the reissuing of old call signs doesn't necessarily bother me too much, in the fact that Ofcom have got to reissue call signs, otherwise they'll run out eventually.
Absolutely true. And I'm just looking at the comments, and I noticed we got Tim G5TM on here, says a lot of false indignation on social media about reissuing UK call signs. 99.9% of the aggrieved are people who aren't related to anyone whose call might be recycled, which again is actually, I think, a pretty valid point.
What's also worth noting here, though, is that in the vast majority of cases, of course it's not the case for everybody, but in the vast majority of cases, the licensed ham in the family is just one. So, unless, you've got, children who also take up the hobby, like chances are it's just going to be the one person. Now, their family is probably not going to give a crap about whether that call sign gets reissued.
Absolutely true. Yeah. But then what about if they were a member of the club, they might have quite a few ham friends. If they hear it on 40 metres on the Inter-G and 80 metres.
That is a valid point. And that's probably why there needs to be a slightly longer grace period. But I think that ultimately call signs are going to get reissued, whether we like it or not.
I agree. I think they need to be reissued, but I just feel like 2 years is perhaps not enough. I would have thought maybe nearer 5 years, maybe.
I agree with you, James. Big time. 2 years isn't a lot. Because when you've got guys complaining about call signs from the 1930s getting reissued, that's a bit extreme.
Personally, I agree with you. That's a bit over the top, I think.
It can take more than 2 years for a QSL card to work its way through the bureau to you. If you get a reissued call sign, you might start getting cards through thinking, you don't remember that one. I don't know. It can take more than 2 years, can't it? It can take forever.
Yeah, fair point. I think we all agree it needs to
be longer.
It needs to happen. Call signs do have to be reissued because they're running out. But
well, they're only running out because we've only got one. So there's no other M0 EFI. I'm the only M0 EFI. I just happen to throw an extra M in it. So there isn't a an MW0 EFI. So the other way they can go is if we all had regional secondary locators and had to use them, then they could reissue the letters for everybody. I've got a friend up in Elgin who does motorsport recovery the same as I do. He's also a Land Rover V8 fan. I'm MM0 EFI, which is electronic fuel injection, and he's MM1 EFI. And he couldn't believe that I'd got that call sign because I got my advanced license after he did.
The problem with that though is if you've only got one MM0 EFI, but you reissue, say, M0 EFI or MW0 EFI for England or Wales, what happens if you then travel into England or into Wales?
I'm still MM0 EFI. I just use it everywhere.
But then does that become confusing if you're using your call sign in the wrong country?
Well, if they're making it, we're kind of drifting into regional secondary locators, which is probably going to be the biggest topic tonight anyway. And if they make them optional, I can be M0 EFI working in Scotland, and if someone working me is not going to know if I'm in Scotland, England, Ireland, or Wales, Northern Ireland.
That was the next thing, and it's a nice segue onto that point because they're dropping the requirement to use the secondary regional locator for, I believe it's all call signs except for intermediate, the current two, or it would be 2E0, 2W0, etc., etc. Now they're looking at trying to move away from those 2-something-0 call signs, aren't they? They're trying to move them over to M8, so it would eventually be all call signs. But for me, the one thing I will say is going over to Wales, it is a pain having my call sign changed. And there's one summit right on the border where literally the border runs down the footpath on which you walk. So if I'm on that side of the footpath, I have to identify as MW0. If I literally go 5 meters in that direction, I have to identify as M0. So to me, it would be nice to have the choice of doing it, but not have it as compulsory, and perhaps be able to use the same call sign when I do go over to Wales, which is what is proposed in the document here. So again, go around the table. What do people think of that proposal?
Well, this is my most controversial point. I think they should keep them. They should be mandatory, the secondary locators, and I think they should be mandatory for England as well, because you guys have a silent E in your call signs. If you're a full license holder, obviously if you're an intermediate, you've got 2E0 at the moment. But to level the playing field so everyone knows where everyone is, if the folk in England used their E and everyone else used their letter, then that would solve the problem. But I completely disagree with making it optional.
Likewise, I disagree. I disagree that the regional secondary locators, they should stay. I think Fraser's right there. We get away without using an E, as in ME0 RSF. Why should it be us? Why does Scotland not get away with it? Why do Wales not get away with it? Why should it be us? But didn't they do the same with the stroke P, stroke M, all them? They made those optional as well. I'm sure they did.
Yeah,
optional.
Yeah.
But
they're optional. But I believe there was something about you're only supposed to use recognised suffixes, which. So when you hear people come out with things like static mobile, now I know a lot of people in the comments will probably dislike this because you hear all sorts of weird suffixes that, like I say, it's a bit controversial when you hear things like static mobile, for example. But that under the new system, as proposed now, would actually be valid. They're basically saying you can use any suffix you want. So again, maybe another controversial point.
Yeah, there's a comment on the chat. I've been proved slightly wrong. I said my call sign was M0 EFI on my license, but it is M#0 EFI according to Brett. And I've got my license here because I always keep it in my rucksack when I go abroad, and it does say M#0 EFI. Replace the hash with an RSL in accordance with clause 2 or note C. Thanks, Brett.
Okay, that's an interesting one. I've not seen that before because mine does say M0 GQC. Interestingly, my intermediate call sign just says 20JJD. It hasn't got the regional locator in. Of course, you're
I think it depends
expected to include that.
I think it depends on when your license was last issued by by Ofcom, because more late. If you go in and revalidate your license just by logging in now, and generate your call sign documents, your license documents, it will put the hash in there. I'm going to go slightly opposite direction and think that one of two things either needs to happen. I think either Ofcom sticks with RSLs being mandatory in the same format they currently are, or the DX body, whoever that be, whether that's Logbook of the World or whoever it happens to be, needs to decide that the United Kingdom is one DXCC. So rather than England, Scotland, Wales, and the rest of the nations and Crown dependencies being their own DX entity, the UK needs to be one. And I feel that would upset quite a lot of people.
I was going to say, how controversial would that be with Scotland, Wales?
Yeah, it would totally
especially
be.
the likes of Ireland, I would have thought.
Yeah, well, it totally would be. But that would be the only way, I think, in order to maintain for Ofcom to push this through and it not have an impact elsewhere. Apart from the case that you just highlighted there, James, about being 5 meters over the border and having to change your call sign, the only thing I can think of where it's a pain in the backside to either change your call sign by adding a W or an M or taking it away is if you're using something like APRS, because that could be, you cross the border into Wales, you're supposed to pull over and reconfigure your TNC in order to put a W in your call sign.
Currently.
I'm sure
currently you're supposed to,
on the Severn Bridge.
Well, yeah, but currently supposed to.
The Severn Bridge halfway across.
Yeah, they need to have a dedicated APRS bay. But it's ridiculous. So no one does that obviously now, but technically that's in breach of their licensing conditions because they're not identifying correctly based on where they are. So I can see there are fringe cases like that where having optional RSLs would be perfect. But I think there's bigger things where I think what this is ultimately going to end up being, where Ofcom say there's no regulatory need for us to do this. RSLs are optional. They are highly encouraged. That's, I think, is how the wording is going to end up being.
They're also something that you would want to use. So, example, the video I just put out this morning, I was on a hill probably 60 miles south of where I live, 2 meter sideband, and there was an M6 called me, and straight away, my ears perked up. Oh, I've got to work this guy because he's not in my country. And when you're working 2 meters, someone that's not in your country is a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, even if they're only 2 miles down the road, technically they're still in another country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of those things few people agree with, few people disagree with. It's personally, I like the fact they've given you the option of using E in the call sign for England, but personally, I quite like the fact that it's optional whether or not you use it in any country. I'm sure there'll be a few people who will disagree with me on that, but by the time you start putting in Mike Whiskey 0 Golf Quebec Charlie / Portable, it becomes quite a long call sign, and it does, especially if you're doing a contest, it does tend to throw people, as I found, because my recent video where I did 2 meters SSB on a Welsh mountaintop, I don't know if I included it in the video, but there were quite a few people who got a little bit lost when I started rattling off that call sign. So I like the fact that you've got the option of doing it, and they're almost kind of leaving it down to you.
Yeah, just looking at the comments, Irish Dave says if you're Scottish and you go to Wales, you should apply to Ofcom for an MW licence. But obviously that's going to increase the admin for Ofcom rather than reduce it. And then somebody else further up, I think it was G5 Stu, said that the countries wanted their own identity. That's why we've got these region RSLs. But I read very recently it was the RSGB's very first QSL manager that he kept badgering them to give RSLs so he would know where the cards were coming to and from. So it was kind of an internal thing.
So Dave says, I know EI is not UK, but do all ops operate in different countries of the UK? I think there's a surprising number that do. I think a lot of people take their radios away on holiday with them, so it might only be once or twice a year. But I think there's a surprising number that do. I mean, obviously, I do it quite a lot for SOTA summits on the air. I quite often just drive over the border, but I'd say I'm probably a bit of a fringe case there. I think most people would only do it maybe once a year if they're away on holiday, maybe not even that.
Some people never work portable. They work from their shack. And then I'm the opposite. I only work portable.
Again, it's down to what you like to do in the hobby, isn't it? We all have our own. We all have our own choices. Okay, so what do we think about the proposal then for greater supervised third-party use of radio equipment? So I'll read you the quote which I got from the proposal document. It's on page 21. It says, "We believe the current rules concerning who may operate radio equipment are too complex and restrict the ability of the hobby to showcase itself. We therefore wish to simplify the rule whilst ensuring that the licensee remains ultimately answerable for the operation of the radio equipment." So as things currently stand, if you're a foundation or an intermediate, I don't believe you're allowed to supervise anyone who is not licensed. I think you can supervise another licensed operator, but you can't supervise someone who's unlicensed. Now, under this proposal, that would change. So anybody with a license could supervise anybody else within the conditions of their license. It's also worth noting, I think, that the current system, you're meant to maintain control of the radio, which I think in real terms means you have to hold the mic and press the PTT button for them, which it sounds like by this proposal that may change. You just have to be there supervising them and you're responsible for it. So
I think this is a really good thing. And here's why I think it is. And this is the sort of how I rationalized it in my head is you're out at a special event station and you're exposed to members of the public who are coming over and you're chatting amateur radio with them. And you have one person who's really, really keen. They've never come across amateur radio before. You are their first exposure to the hobby. And under the current rules, all we can say to them is, do you want to say hello to somebody? Do you want to pass a greetings message? Whereas being able to say to someone, well, do you want to have a go? That is hugely empowering. And, that person, might operate the radio for 20 minutes, half an hour, who knows? Might it be 5 minutes? But, that will easily sow the seed for them to go off and then, explore and get their own license. So I know that some people, because this got a bit of debate on the video that I published, said about, well, where will the line class of supervision, if a kid is using their dad's call sign up in the attic, but, the actual license ham is downstairs watching the telly, does that count as supervision? Well, obviously not. But I
would say you'd be expected to be in the room with them, looking over their shoulder.
Yeah, so I
think that would be reasonable.
So perhaps there needs to be some. I mean, it's kind of there in the document. Ultimately the buck stops with the license holder. So I think it's hugely empowering, and I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah,
I think it's a really powerful thing. I was doing SOTA from a summit somewhere near here before Christmas, and there was a guy came. I was on 40 meters, and there was a guy came on from Mallaig, which is right on the west coast of Scotland, and he said, "I'm actually operating from the Mallaig Academy radio station, and I'm just showing the students how it worked." And I said, "Oh, do you want to put a couple of them on?" And he did, and he put. Obviously, he was controlling it. He had a full license, and he put a couple of the students on who passed a message to me, and I gave them some information about what I was doing, and it was brilliant. And it was the best 2 QSOs that I'd had. Probably in the year. That made me feel great that I was able to do that. And if we could make it easier, all the better. Because the other time I was involved in something like that is when myself and Ben were doing that country file thing, he passed the mic, obviously, to the two presenters. Ben was still sitting with the body of the FT857 and he's, under his control. The amount of flack he got from the idiots and the pedants about the fact that they were holding the microphone and had the push to talk button in their hand, because the rules around it are pretty vague, but Ben was still totally in control of that radio station. He could have hit the off button at any point, So for me, it's just about clearing that up and making it more accessible for folk.
Is that all levels of license can supervise doing that? Is it all levels?
I believe so. I think that's the proposal, yeah.
Right.
But obviously, it would only be up to your level of license, which if
Under
your
your
foundation,
conditions, of
that
course.
would be, well, I'll say foundation would be 10 watts, but we'll come on to that in a bit because that's the other proposal. They're talking about changing license.
Because I think we've all had it, us guys that operate portable that do sort of things like that. You've been on a sort of summit and somebody comes up and start asking questions. Who's that you talking to? I had it on Fountains Fell last year with Natalie. The farmer actually came across in his tractor and says, what's that? He wasn't being funny or anything like that. He looked at the antenna. And I was speaking to a guy down in Ipswich and he was fascinated by it, So we all get questions. So perhaps, just like somebody said, do you want to say hello? I don't think it'd do any harm. Promote the hobby.
I think it's a good thing. Let's put another twist on this. I don't know if there's anyone on here does Raynet, so I might be the only one. Obviously, I can't speak for Raynet, but as a Raynet member for the emergency comms groups, now, often we're not doing emergencies, we're just helping out with communications for charitable events, but there have been numerous times where the marshals have said, can I just have a quick chat with so-and-so on another checkpoint? So, to me, we've never been allowed to hand the radio over to them unless they're on commercial PMR frequencies, which we do sometimes. But to me, it would be handy to just be able to give them a handheld and say, yes, chat to that person. If I'm stood next to them, then once they finish chatting,
do we want to go down the Raynet rabbit hole, James, about tactical call signs and everything else that Raynet can use from time to time? But for me, it's if it fits the purpose, they should be allowed to do it.
Okay. What's the other? What's the consensus then? What do other people think? Overall, I think it's a good thing. We can argue whether or not it's good for Raynet, but I think overall it's a good thing for introducing new people into the hobby.
James, are we going to go? Are we going to talk about some of the proposals? Like, does everyone understand the proposals, or I suggest we go around the room because we're all different. All got different interests.
Yeah.
And what proposals appeal to us? We're all different. All do different things. So to digital, QRP. Go around the room and what
by all means,
what actually appeals to us. I'll start that off. I'm not particularly interested in having any more power. It'd be nice. It'd be okay. I do mobile. I don't work from home, so occasionally, but power is not essential for me. But to be able to set up a repeater or a gateway would be interesting for me. It's something I'd be interested. Before I spoke to you on the phone, didn't I? I said earlier today. I said if I wanted to have a repeater under the current laws, I'm in a flat. I don't have a garden. If they came round here and I had a mag mount, I think they'd laugh at me. But it wouldn't go through.
Then again, we spoke about this on the phone earlier. I used to hold a NOV for a Echolink gateway, and my antenna was frankly quite poor.
Was it a mag? It wasn't a mag mount though. What was it?
It was just a piece of wire tuned up in the.
Okay, well that's worse than.
But the wire was only about, I think it was about 2 meters long.
Yeah.
And
that's given me encouragement. So. That's given me encouragement. But
that was on
forward,
6 meters. They'd only give it to me on 6 meters because there weren't any 2 meter 77s
Yeah,
frequencies.
because of too
there was a
busy
wire in the attic, so they
frequencies.
will give it to you, but it's, as the rules currently stand, it's a bit of a pig to get through because you have to have other operators available to shut the station down. You have to nominate other people who can pull the power if it gets stuck PTT, or if Ofcom want you to shut it down for whatever reason. So that's the NOV process, and it is honestly a little bit of a pain.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go around the room, and I'll hand it over to Chris next, up in the top left. Which ones of these proposals interest you?
To be honest, Chris, there's not much changes for me. As you know, I've got the full call sign, and I run no more than 10 watts. I run QRP. It's just my choice. I think the advance is going to be allowed a kilowatt out there, so nothing much changes for me really. Of course, I'd like to see the regional secondary locators stay. If they make them optional, that's fine. The call signs, as in MW, MM, I think they should stay as well. There's not much really changes for me looking at it. I'd be interested to have a look through the repeater thing that you mentioned, because again, is that all levels of license? Are we going to get repeaters? Are we going to get repeaters pop up all over the place?
I think Jonathan knows more than us. By the way, thank you to Jonathan for explaining it all in your video. I did appreciate that.
That's all right. Under the proposal, intermediate and full license holders will be able to put on their own repeater gateway or beacon, so long as the output power is less than 5 watts. On this proposal, I think this is actually quite an interesting one, because I don't think the RSGB ETCC is going to be particularly happy about this. But I think Ofcom with this particular proposal aren't necessarily thinking, or weren't necessarily thinking when they wrote it, about permanent repeaters. I think they were thinking about temporary cross-band repeaters like Raynet use and other groups use for, hikes and marathons and that type of thing. And technically, at the moment, I've put on cross-band repeaters many times in order to, if and I will also hold up my hand as also being a Raynet member. But I've done that many times of have a cross-band repeater in my car, so I can just walk around the checkpoint with a handheld. That is a particularly valid use for a cross-band repeater. Or, if there's a checkpoint that's or a station that's in a bit of a valley that can't get back to net control, well, then you put a cross-band repeater at the top of the hill in order to get over the hump. There are perfectly valid uses for a cross-band repeater. And I think that's what Ofcom are sort of aiming this particular bit of the proposal at, rather than it being a sort of a full-term permanent thing. Having said that, the moment that this proposal goes live, I'm moving my All-Star node onto an antenna rather than a dummy load, because I can. So there's that argument to it as well. So that's the one I think for me that's caused me the most amount of headache, or most amount of scratching my head, because it's, well, what are Ofcom really aiming at here? Because I don't think the ETCC is going to be particularly impressed with, as they would see it, uncoordinated frequency management.
Notably, it does say in the document that you're expected to be able to show that you've taken measures not to cause interference, and they suggest going through the ETCC has been a way of showing compliance with that.
Yeah, but how? Okay, so
how are they going to enforce that?
How can they enforce that if they're making it basically a free-for-all? Because I think 5 watts, I think the language around this could be far clearer on this. I think if Ofcom were intending this to be sort of aimed at cross-band repeaters, for say in the case of repeaters, because I don't think anybody's actually going to be putting on their own in-band repeater. Certainly not if it's limited to 5 watts. Sort of money you'd be wasting in cavities on that would be insane. Anyway, so I think if Ofcom were intending this for cross-band repeaters, then they should have just said that. They should have said that and then offered, or hopefully, if this is how it's going to be, put in the actual license document when it gets released, what suggested frequency pairs are. That would be one way to do it. So actually, there's already something on that one. I'll go to the next pair. So I think there's a ways that Ofcom could do this, and there is. I don't think the ETCC would want to get involved with unlicensed things. That's my personal view on what the ETCC do. I think they do good work. I think they do a good job in managing spectrum. I think they are a little bit overzealous at times, and I've had issues getting NOVs through the ETCC because of a frequency that I chose on the application form. They didn't come back and say, how about this one instead? They just said, no. Well, that's actually not very helpful at all. So there is ways this could be amended, let's say, in order to make it better.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to make this all about RAINET, but coming at it from the RAINET perspective, simplifying the use of talk-through repeaters, I think, is a good thing, because at the moment there's a permit scheme in place. I think you're supposed to record the fact that you've used it and submit it all to head office. It all gets a bit confusing. I don't know how many people actually...
The thing is, the problem with that for me is that has no legal basis. The RAINET talk-through permit, as they call it, and by the way, talk-through is completely the wrong terminology, but more on that later. The talk-through permit that RAINET issue has no legal standing whatsoever. So you're just as unlicensed in doing that in terms of having a RAINET talk-through permit as you are for any other Joe just doing it on their own back.
Yes, I mean, from that perspective, I think bringing clarity to it and permitting it is a good thing. But my concern would be frequency coordination between clubs. If every club threw up their own repeater, potentially on quite a big hillside, you could have a bit of a, become a bit of a clash, wouldn't it? But at the same time, how many repeaters are out there that you don't hear any traffic on? So I don't know. I'm a little on the fence with it, to be honest.
No, if I can come in on that, with just on those points. I had to jump through a few hoops, obviously, to get an NOV to run an APRS transmit and receive digipeater, and I have to repeat that NOV every year. And in reality, I pretty much just have to tell the emerging technologies group that nothing's changed, and they give me it for another year, which is great. I live in a rural area, so I've got the only repeater within 40 miles of here. Frequency conflict isn't going to be a problem. I think, in America, you can put a repeater up. You can, if you've got permission, you can drag one up the top of a mountain, get it going with solar panels, leave it up there. Great. America is a sparsely populated country for a good bit of it. I think the population density here, the frequency allocations we've got, I think that could be a massive problem if everyone's stamping all over one another. So my view is you still have to have the either the NOV or the ETCC signing stuff off. Whether you need to re-sign it off every year, I don't know. That's extra admin. I get rid of that. I know, as for amps, I've got a Tokyo high power amp sitting over there, 1 kilowatt one. I used to use it when I lived in my previous house, which was very rural 10 years ago. Never run more than about 200 watts out of it. Why is it sitting on a shelf over there? Well, the village I live in now, everybody's telephone lines are served off a wooden pole. And if I fired that up, I think it would shut down the internet for the whole village. Already, I'll probably have people's lights turning on and off just with the 100 watts that I've got. But I think a kilowatt's unnecessary. When I don't know why we're doing that, to be honest with you. I know that in America you can run in Italy and all this kind of stuff, but I think for the size of our country and the density of population and towns and cities, I think the kilowatt's a crazy idea.
But at the same time, how many people are going to be able to afford to go out and spend $8,000 on an amplifier?
Well, Waters and Stanton have already started banging on about it. You watch any of Peter's videos in the last week, and HF amplifiers mentioned in every one. I
think there are a great number of hams who stick at 400 watts. Let's just say that from the off. That abide by the terms of the license. There's also a great number of hams who are already running a kilowatt or more. And they are going to run a kilowatt or more, regardless of what the power output level says on the license document. I think that the proposed changes aren't going to affect me at all. I don't have an amplifier. Everything I've ever done is 100 watts. I once briefly, when I did work at the shop, I did briefly bring an amplifier home. I got scared by it and I took it back. So I don't intend to ever run more than maybe a couple of 100 watts if I was to get a 200 watt radio, but that would be the limit for me. However, I can see cases where, having that extra little bit of oomph would be useful. So particularly, in things like where it's a busy band, you're in a contest condition and, you just need that extra little bit of power to break the pile up in order to make the contact. Nothing's going to change in terms of, the DX code of contact with, only running the power that you need to run. That's still going to apply. But I think it just gives a little bit more freedom and a little bit more elbow room for someone who has got the space for the antennas, and the deep enough pockets for the energy bill in order to break the pile up, in order to make the DX contact that they're choosing to make, and then carry on with their day.
And maybe for club field days as well, it's a good thing. I mean, I've got down here a linear. It's only a small one. It runs about 250, 300 watts, so it's not massive. It does help when the conditions aren't great, because what you have to remember is everyone else, a lot of people in this country have quite a high noise floor. So if you've got an S5 noise floor and you're running 10 watts hitting an S5, I did a test with my amp. 10 watts versus 250 watts is roughly about 2 S points for me. So that takes you from an S5 up to an S7, which can be the difference between a contact or no contact. So
yeah, I agree. There's a place for them in contesting. If you're a serious, this is the thing we've talked already on this stream tonight. We're all into this hobby for different things. I mean, some people only do microwaves. Some people, mainly live for contests, and they're probably running a kilowatt anyway, but now they can, do it legally, or they'll go and buy a 3 kilowatt amp now.
Well, that's absolutely true. We all have our own aspect, and the problem we've got is that the regulator, OFCOM, they have to make the license fit or cover what everybody wants to do, and I don't think that's an easy task, because as we've all said, we've all got different interests, and most of us are, I say QRP, maybe 50 watts. Most of us are relatively low power operators. So
what about the environmental impact of everyone running kilowatt amps?
Will it make a big difference in power consumption? How many radio amateurs are there running massive amps?
A fraction, I would say. What's really interesting with this, though, is I think Ofcom have been thinking about this for some time. And I say that because when I was working at the shop, and it wasn't long after I started working at the shop, so I think we're probably looking at about 2017, maybe 2018, we had a request from Ofcom come in to basically for information to say how many amplifiers we had sold in the last, I think it was a year, possibly they had asked for, that were capable of transmitting more than a kilowatt. Just, they didn't want to know anything else. They didn't want to know who had bought them or anything like that. They just wanted to know how many had been sold. So I think this is coming out from the fact that Ofcom know that in the hands of hams, there are a significant number of amplifiers which can do easily more than a kilowatt. And it's Ofcom basically saying, oh, right, well, people are doing it anyway. We may as well just legalize it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think I've read the arguments in the forums for, well, is it particularly environmentally friendly? Is it green? I think it would be a bit rich for me to say, well, I refuse to run more than 100 watts because I don't want to pollute the environment. No. Then get in my car and drive 75 miles to work each day. I'm just
an electric car, James. What happened to the electric car?
Well, yeah, okay, it's a bad example. I actually do have an electric car. Well, my motorhome's diesel, so I'll just take the motorhome in instead.
Yeah.
But no, okay, it's a bad example, but you get the point.
Yeah.
In terms of energy use, yeah, it's going to be very small, but it's still going to be, It's still an interesting point, and I think all that it's going to do is just level the playing field against. I'm not going to name a country, but we all know the one I'm talking about. Countries in Europe that have a significantly higher power limit. It's just going to slightly level the playing field. But
someone's put on the Jonathan. Someone's put on the chat that Italy is only allowed to run 500 watts. If that happened to be the country you were mentioning,
is that true for Italy? I know that Germany is 500 watts.
Is it?
I'm not sure that's right about Italy.
Okay.
And Spain as well has quite a high power output level. So, yeah, I think it's just leveling the playing field. I mean, the States, as you rightly say, Fraser, the States is a far more sparsely populated country, and they have up to 1,500 watts that they can play with. So I think a kilowatt is about right. It's the way I'm looking at all of the proposal in terms of power output is that by and large, each level of license is getting a 3 dB uplift in power output. Yes, I know I feel it's slightly more, but that's kind of what we're looking at. It's just 3 dB more, which, for the most part is just an S point. So
did I read it somewhere that the increase in power levels for each level of license is an incentive to progress?
It's always, that's how it's always been advertised.
I'm not too sure about that, to be honest.
It wasn't for me. I'll say this right now. So the power output thing for me wasn't the driving factor for me to get a full call. The driving factor for me to get a full call was the fact that I wanted to go to the States and operate under reciprocal. The fact that I then got a US call sign later on kind of defeats that point. But the power output thing, I mean, I use 100 watts because that's just what my radio does, but it wasn't the driving force behind me operating my license.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I wanted, at the time I was involved in a scout group, I wanted the ability to be able to supervise other people, albeit only passing greetings messages. There were also a couple of scouts who did actually have their foundation license, so I wanted the ability to be able to supervise them as licensed amateurs up to legal power. So
it's funny how we've all got different reasons, isn't it? I studied electronics at university, so I just took it right through for technical reasons because it was, it was kind of taking me back to what I studied in my youth.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the comments here, and 2E0GIY says 1,200 watts is much more reasonable in the radio amateur world than 1,000 watts. So he actually thinks it should be slightly more power. Now, personally, I think this extra boost is a good thing. Will I use it? Probably not. Certainly not at home, and so I'm certainly not going to be carrying an amplifier and a generator up here. So that's not going to be a practical proposition. But I think for operating in a field in the middle of nowhere for a club environment, and I don't know if it's been announced publicly yet, but with something I might be getting involved in next week, I think that might be...
It hasn't, but I'm also involved in it too.
Exactly, yeah. I don't know how much we're supposed to be saying about that, so I don't want to
you're going to
let too much go.
Now you've let the cat out of the bag. Half out of the bag.
Let's just say we're going portable next week.
Excellent.
But I think for club operations, it's a really good thing. Like I say, would it be a good idea to run it where I am now in the mid-terrace house? No, absolutely not. And to be honest...
The interesting thing about power in the comments, and it's G0FVT, it just reminded me, when I did my NOV for my Digipeater, it's not about the power at the radio, it's about your radiated power. And I'm surprised that OFCOM hasn't changed to radiated power because... all the what's the stuff we're doing, the safety stuff we have to do on that spreadsheet, that's all radiated power, isn't it? And I'm sort of really surprised they've not put that in the consultation to move towards radiated power at all levels.
That's a brilliant point, is that? Because a kilowatt into a directional antenna with like 6 dB gain. Yeah, good point, that Fraser. Massive.
Well, that's the other point I was about to make about running 1,000 watts here. The argument from OFCOM, I think I read in their document, is that they're saying we're also governed by those restrictions as well. So in theory, that would stop someone like me from, if I managed to get a high power amp, from running 1,000 watts here in the mid-terrace house, because my antenna would be too close to my neighbours. So
Yeah.
I think that's the argument they're saying. So it brings me back to this point. I think it's good to have the option if you're in a suitable location, if you live on a farm, if you're doing a field day in the middle of nowhere with the club. I think it's a good option to have.
And if you do it in a house and estate and you start shutting off your neighbour's Wi-Fi, you're not going to be doing it for long, are you? Let's face it.
No, well, I would hope that you've done your calculations and would realise that actually you're going to fall outside the conditions of your licence then, aren't you? So I don't know. It's that thing of you're kind of giving someone a licence to do something, then saying, here you go, you can do it, but be sensible. It's how many people are sensible. I'd like to think most radio amateurs would be sensible, but you're always going to get a few idiots, aren't you?
Same in any walk of life or hobby, isn't it?
Exactly. So, okay, moving on from there then, what do we think about increasing the power limits for the foundation and intermediate licenses? Because as I understand it, I think it was foundation currently is 10 watts. I think was it 50 watts there?
20. 20 watts.
Sorry, I stand corrected, 20.
It might help. I think, initially I thought, well, that's a waste of time because I obviously spend my life on hilltops running 10 watts from a KX2 and I can work the planet with that. But it made me think back when I first got my amateur radio license because I was involved in an off-road driving club. And rather than use CBs in their Land Rovers, everybody had amateur radio. And that's how I got my MM3. And, would it encourage more people to use VHF if they could use more power? Because we always talk about how 2 meters and 77s isn't used. And if foundation license holders could run, 20 watts on 2 meters, it'd be certainly more usable for them than what they've got currently.
In some ways, for me, it comes back to the point I made earlier about a lot of people here, with the UK being what it is, quite populated, a lot of RF noise, struggling to get over the possibly S5, S6, S7 noise that a lot of people have. I think it gives foundation licenses a standing chance. And personally, I would have probably gone further and gone for 50 watts for foundations, given them the current intermediate level. I don't know what other people make of that.
I think that going back to the point about the power output being an incentive to upgrade your license, I think the structure of 20 for a foundation license holder, then 100 for an intermediate license holder, I think that is going to be quite the incentive to upgrade to intermediate. So I think that's possibly about right. I think to be honest, it's 20 watts is an interesting figure. And I saw Tim put a post out on Facebook the other day asking the question about people's thoughts about foundation license getting 20. And someone said about it 25 being maybe a slightly better figure, given the fact that most mobile radios will do 25 watts. But you think, well, by the time you've got some RG58 on it, going to your 2 meter stick on the car, 25 watts is going to be 20 watts by the feed point, so you're fine.
True.
I think it's about right. I don't have any issues with it. To be honest, if I would just be plucking figures out of the air if I suggest anything else. So I think it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, you read the argument on safety, which I think in some ways is a bit of a misnomer because you have to pass the exam and cover a bit of safety in order to get the foundation. So I think to say that giving a foundation more than 10 watts is on safety grounds is a bit of a misnomer, really, to be honest.
So, what can either folk in the room or on the chat tell me now what the advantage under the proposals? What's going to be the advantage to having a full license under the proposals apart from the kilowatt?
I suspect a lot of people
access
will
to
stick at
60 meters. That's anyone I can think of.
Yeah,
that's
true.
one.
But yeah, you're right. There's going to be a lot of people that get as far as intermediate, have 100 watts on their intermediate license, and don't progress any further.
Unless you want 60 or want to operate abroad, which is the only two things I can think of off the top of my head.
Or you want a kilowatt output power. But yeah, you're right. If you don't want to operate on 60 meters and you don't want to operate abroad, there's not much incentive. I saw someone say the other day about how what the Ofcom should be proposing is basically the same kind of system that exists in the States by the FCC in terms of frequency allocation. I think that would be very hard because Ofcom have already given, they can't necessarily as easily take away.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering with this if what Ofcom are getting at with this is obviously you have your foundation, your basic license, which gets you into the hobby, get a bit of experience, then you get your intermediate, which under the new proposals will give you the full 100 watts that most radios do, and most people would stop, or a lot of people would stop there unless you want it supervised people at 1,000 watts for club club outing on the 1,000 watts. So I'm wondering if what they're getting at is most people are going to get to intermediate and then be happy with that, and it's going to reduce the number of call signs being issued, because instead of issuing 3 call signs, they're only issuing 2 call signs. Although, having said that, they are taking the old ones back, aren't they?
It's interesting.
I'm not sure.
I think, it's an interesting point you raise there. I think that it's going to come down to the real incentive for becoming full is going to be sort of the personal pride, the fact that I wanted to and I did. Not necessarily because I want the privileges that a full call sign gives me, but because I want to be the best I can be. And that was for me. And Tim said a very similar thing in the chat just now. But that was the thing for me, is doing the US call. No, I don't need it. I don't think I've ever actually used K6JSX when in America. I've used it a few times on a remote station, but I've never used it in the States. But for me, it was the fact that I wanted to, and I did. And it wasn't good enough for me that I did. 1 year I got both the technician and the general. That wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to go and get the extra. So I did. And I think that's going to be the thing, is it's going to be people, that would be the driving factor for me, is wanting to be the best you can be, not necessarily the privileges that the call sign gives you.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jason. I agree with that. Same in any hobby. In any hobby that you do, surely you should want to be as best you can. I don't know, playing golf, for instance, you want to improve, you want to progress, you want to get better. I did the opposite to you guys. I got my foundation 2005, and then I did the intermediate 2006, and I stuck at intermediate for 5 years. I were happy enough.
I did the same.
Then I had a gap in my life, and I decided to do the full 2011. And when I got this full license at M0RSF, that's when I decided to go the QRP route. When I were intermediate, I had a Yagi, two-element Yagi, TGM communications, 50 watts. I could work what I wanted basically with that. So I chose, that's just me personally, but I wanted the full call sign. I wanted the M0RSF. And that's why I did, sort of, because I wanted to, just like you did. Didn't have to, just because I wanted to.
Yeah. I had very similar. So I passed my foundation in 2008. I did my intermediate in 2010. And it wasn't until the end of 2015 that I got my full. So I had a similar sort of period between licenses. Another reason for me upgrading from my intermediate was the fact that my intermediate call sign was horrible. So that was another reason that I upgraded.
Oh, did you not choose it? Did you just get something given and thought, oh no?
So I had M3 VJO, which when I was a spotty, how old would I have been in 2008? 15-year-old, sounded like a really good idea. And then 2 years later, when I got the intermediate, I thought, I'll just stick with VJO. Why not? That was a horrible call sign. So that's why I changed when I got to M0.
Well, there's someone else on here saying the only reason they got an American call sign was for remote stations as well, which I think, Jonathan, is what you said you're doing.
Yeah, it's basically the only thing I use mine for, yeah.
Because I was looking at doing the American one. I might still do it because there's a group online you can join, and you can use a lot of these they're basically big gun DX stations remotely.
Yeah.
But you have to have an American license to be able to use it. So it's something I've been looking at. Whether or not I'll do it, I don't know.
And the barrier for entry. So when I did mine, it was a bit hard to do in the UK because it all changed in COVID, but pre-COVID, not only did you have to have a US mailing address, but you have to have three? It's either 2 or 3 extra license holders if you want to go for extra in the room with you when you're doing the exam. That's changed, and now the invigilation can be done remotely. So the barrier to entry has actually got a bit lower, and you can, there are services online that you can pay in order to get a PO box in the States. So, and they'll forward any post that arrives there to you. Or you just get friendly with a US ham and say, can I use your address? There's easy ways around it. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things. If you want to do it, the license exam costs you $30. But if you pass all 3 in the same session, you've gone from 0 to extra for $30. So you might as well do it.
The Irish lads are coming in with the fact they've only got 1 level of license and it's a full license. So, to go from that's kind of like what the RSGB's just brought out now, really, isn't it? That's straight to full. So that would be a bit of a challenge in Ireland to get that level straight off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I kind of like the 3-stage license, but I also like the option of going to full as well. So I think OFCOM have kind of got that right, actually, with that option.
I think so too. I think the direct to full option, if you have a background in electronics, or maybe you're in the army doing signaling and that kind of thing, I think it makes perfect sense. If you've already got the background knowledge, and then maybe all you need to do is actually look up the licensing terms, why not?
Yeah, because I can imagine if you've got that background, you could be a professional radio engineer installing commercial stuff for years, and then come into ham and have to start at the foundation. And personally, I think that would be frustrating, and in many ways, it's actually ridiculous. So I think it's a good option to go for the full. I like the comment I saw on here. Where is it? We're talking about remotes, so this is a nice segue onto the next point I wanted to raise up, where Jimbo says he struggles to work the TV remote. So one of these proposals is that Ofcom wants to make remote operating via the internet more easy. At the moment, I believe you can only do it on a full license, and the proposal is, I think they're bringing it in for all grades of license to use remote. What do we reckon? Good idea? Or do you need that experience and allegedly higher level of qualification? And I say allegedly because there's a lot of foundations that actually know more than some full licenses. So, do we think you need that higher qualification?
I think it makes perfect sense, to be honest. I think that having the internet is now such an ingrained and integral part of life. Why would you not be able? And given the fact that actually doing a remote station over the internet has got easier than ever, whether you've got a radio that's got a built-in server function like ICOM and Yaesu do, and even Kenwood as well, or whether you're using older gear and you're having to interface it via a computer, it's just easy. So there's not a lot that can go wrong. So as long as you're able to certify the fact that you have full control of your station, and crack on, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's the point I was going to make. I think when people first started doing remote operating, the systems weren't quite there. They were extremely temperamental, quite unreliable. There was quite a lot that could potentially go wrong. Whereas I think now things have become, it's developed so far. They've become so much more reliable. And I've been on a bit of a spending spree. I've got a Flex just under the desk here, which I'm messing about with at the moment, making that work remote. I've not actually done it yet, but from what I believe, or what I've read, that's supposed to be really easy. So why, again, comes back to the point, why can't anyone do it?
I didn't realise how easy and joined up it was running a remote station until I was on a summit, and my friend who I knew was in Germany at a trade show worked me speaking on his mobile phone through an app that he pays some American guy $50 a year to manage via his station, which was in a field in the middle of nowhere in Wales, and he's speaking to me on his phone on 40 meters HF. So yeah, it's just as Jonathan said, it's just, the internet's there, the technology's there. You don't even have to build anything to do it. It's incredible.
Yeah, well, I had a remote station for a while. People who have been watching the channel for a while will know I've got a 3-acre farm site. It's about an hour drive away from my house, and I've got an aerial set up there. And for a while, I put a remote station in there. Absolutely brilliant. Had a whale of a time with that. I had a full-size quarter-wave vertical for 80 meters. So working through the night.
No noise about it. I bet it's S1 noise there.
Exactly. Well, it varies a bit because it's quite near a road, but yeah, the noise level is extremely low. It was absolutely brilliant. There was one slight technical issue with it, which meant it went down. So I had to go down there and pick up all the radio equipment to bring it back home, do some testing. And good job I did, because someone went down there and nicked the solar panels. So it all worked really well until some thief took away my solar panels, which I was a bit annoyed about. So the station never went back in. But for the 2 or 3 weeks I had it down there, it was absolutely brilliant. So I think if you've got the location to be able to do it, I think anyone should be allowed to do it, really, as long as you've got the license.
Looking at the comments, John Clark has said he tests his setup using a selection of SDRs around the country and listen back to the quality of his signal. It's like you can run a remote station, you can be responsible with it, or you can be irresponsible with it. And it's just like any aspect of the hobby, causing QRM, going out of band, over-modulating, running a remote station, you've just got the same responsibilities as any of the other stuff that we do.
Yeah. In the comments, I noticed Chris, Digital Analog Cam, he's had to dash off family stuff. So big thank you to Chris for joining us. He's had to run off early. There was another comment I was looking at in here. I can't find it now. Yeah, I mean, Robbie says some folk can't have antennas installed or live in an apartment or in the USA, a HOA. So having a remote station is a no-brainer. Absolutely. Well, that's where it comes into its own, really. But yeah, using the SDR stations around the country to listen back to the quality of my signal, I do that as well. But the difference is those SDR stations are receive only. We're talking about being able to transmit remotely. And someone says here, operating FT8 remotely whilst on holiday is not a good way to impress your wife. Trust me, I know. I'm just trying to imagine how that conversation went down.
There's a bit of chat on earlier on the chat about using Airborne. I think it's 500 milliwatts, isn't it? And immediately I just thought of you hear Americans, aviation, mobile, and my friend's studying for his pilot's license, and I thought, oh, when he passes, I can go up with him. But then, there's so much other stuff to do with Airborne that I hadn't even considered, like, the balloons and all the other bits and pieces.
Well, perfect segue, because there's a local club around here, and one of the guys is actually a pilot, and he was asking about operating Airborne, and of course everyone came back and said you can't do it. Which under these proposals, if they come in, then it would certainly be good for people who have got their private pilot's license.
Yeah.
I used to have my pilot's license; it's expired now, but I'd always wished I could take a radio up there with me.
Yeah, and it's every band. I mean, I just thought it would be
even
the
running
VHF
APRS
band.
from it, would be a good laugh.
I was saying I just thought it would be the VHF or UHF bands, but when I had a look at it, I think it's every band you can do it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's from memory, and I'm not looking at that part of the document. But
Is
I
it
think
only
it's
the primary?
I think it's only bands where we are primary user,
Okay.
which is still most.
Yeah, it's a good chunk of them, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
trailer 40-meter full length wire behind your Cessna.
Yeah, I'm not sure how well that would go down, dragging that down the runway on takeoff. I think the airport authorities might have something to say about that.
What I'd like to know about this more is whether this is only in UK airspace or whether this is going to be international as well. In the same way that we can operate Maritime Mobile, in in non-territorial waters. So, because at the moment, particularly with the US, they specify the fact that as long as you're in or over international waters, you can use your call sign stroke aeronautical mobile. So I wonder whether this is going to be a similar situation or whether it's only going to be allowed within the UK airspace.
Don't know the answer to that.
No, I don't think it's specified.
I don't think they.
No.
There's nothing specified. I don't think.
Is it a CEPT thing? Can you do it in the other CEPT countries? Is it just that we've not been doing that? Because obviously I know in America you've been able to do it.
I don't know, to be honest. I really don't know. I'm kind of familiar with what we say and what the US says, because they're licenses I hold. So I don't really know what other CEPT countries say.
But you're right, it is vague. There's not a lot of detail in the document about it, is there?
Yeah. Hopefully, as this develops, hopefully they'll elaborate on that a little bit because, as we say, it is quite vague.
I think they will, and I also think that 500 milliwatts is the starting point here. I think that Ofcom will sort of relent and give us more if we sort of push for it in the future.
Some of the comments are good on this. We're building everything from balloon repeaters, balloon beacons, a space station, and Tim's wanting us to use a ZEP antenna, which would be entirely appropriate for that. We would have to build a Zeppelin, obviously. But yeah, there's lots of possibilities.
That's where the ZEP antenna was designed, wasn't it? It was originally used from the Zeppelin balloons, I believe. From what
James, see if you make a big enough kite antenna. That would work.
Someone did ask about this, whether kite antennas would class as airborne. My understanding is I don't think it does because it's attached to the ground.
Yeah,
so
it could be.
Well, you'd hope it doesn't become airborne, otherwise it's taking your radio away with it. But
and you.
Well, hopefully not me. I wouldn't be attached to it. But yeah, it's.
James, have you ever lifted a 2-meter flower pot with a kite?
I thought about it. I've not actually tried it, but I don't know. The problem I foresee with that is the coax cable for it.
Oh, it could be heavy.
You'd want to get it up. You'd want to get it up high, wouldn't you? Which means you need, realistically, to make it worthwhile, you need at least something like RG213, don't you? Or maybe Bessie and Poloni.
It'd be the trade-off, weight versus loss, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I think if you used coax cable light enough, then you'd get too much loss that it wouldn't be worthwhile. By the time you get it up on a 7-meter mast, something like a spider beam mast or something, I don't think there's any advantage to the complexity of doing it with 2 meters on the kite.
It's an interesting thought, though, isn't it?
That would be my take on it, but I don't know. The final point I've got on my list is what do we reckon on the proposal? It's on page 43 on the document to allow foundation licenses more bands, so that the proposal is 2.4 gigs and 5 gigs. Which, personally, I think that's a good thing, and it could be interesting for a lot of people for using QO100. I think it would be nice to let foundations and intermediates on QO100.
Well, they always talk about those microwave bands are under threat. If we don't use them, they'll get sold off for commercial reasons. Yeah. So it's good that Ofcom are wanting to give more amateurs a chance to use them.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. Brett says can never have enough bands. Matt says can't see a problem with extra bands. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And Mad Luke Diary says rubber bands are good.
And brass bands.
Yeah, brass bands. They're always good fun as well. Yeah, I mean, I think let them have it. I don't see the problem with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have access to those bands and I've never used them, so someone else may as well have them.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, I'd like to see more geostationary satellites coming up, like the likes of QO100 would be. It'd be nice to have a few satellite repeaters up. At the moment, I don't think they can access it in the States, so it'd be nice to have something over in the States. So I think encouraging the use of those bands would be would be a good thing. And I was just looking at this. Nathan W says, "What are your thoughts on mobile maritime for everybody?" Again, I think bring it on. If why not?
Aren't Ofcom only saying that only aren't? Hang on, with Maritime Mobile, isn't the proposal only just clearing up the language that currently already exists? They're not actually involved in changing anything. It's only to clear up the language over who can operate Maritime Mobile in UK territorial waters. And i.e., basically they're saying that all license classes have always been able to utilize the full the UK territorial waters for mobile use, but somehow somewhere along the lines a note got put in that it could only be full license holders, which was always wrong. So I think that all they're doing is just clearing up that language. Am I wrong with that? That's how I read it.
I honestly don't know. I've never operated Maritime Mobile, never needed to. So brutally, honestly, I've not actually looked into the regulations on that.
There was
a friend of mine's done it on the ferry over to the Isle of Man. He just asked the captain. The captain said, "Yeah, what frequency are you using?" And he did it on 2 meters, and the captain said, "Crack on." So, I've got a sort of friend that took a mag loop on a cruise ship he was working on for a year, and he used it Maritime Mobile. So people use them on cruise boats and things like that as well, don't they? When they're off on holiday.
Yeah, I think that's always been the rule: is that as long as you've got the permission from the captain of the ship, you're fine.
Yeah.
I don't think it's not like they're saying that Foundation Intermediate license holders are going to be able to use Maritime Mobile in non-territorial waters. All they're saying is that they're just clearing up the language to say that all license holders can go Maritime Mobile in UK territorial waters.
Okay, that makes sense.
But that's how it is now. Just to confirm, that's how it is now. That's not changing.
Yeah. They're just putting some words in to clarify what we already kind of assumed, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ofcom actually say, I mean, I don't know how many people have actually read through the document and seen this list. This is only black and white, but there's 2 columns there. The left-hand column says things they're adding, and the right-hand column is things they're clarifying. So that's probably a good read if you want to see where the differences are actually going to be.
So, James, the reason that I think we've got a good audience tonight, and I'm really pleased we have, is because I'm passionate that like everybody needs to read that, and everybody needs to fill in that survey and put their views over. Because if you don't, you can't complain about what you get.
Exactly. But okay, if we go on to that, looking at the time frame here, Ofcom are still taking comments or responses to this consultation document. So you've got time. If you want to get your thoughts and opinions in, then you need to do it. Responses need to be received before the 4th of September. So you've still got a couple of months. If you want to write to Ofcom, fill in their document. It's all on the Ofcom website. Read up the questions, specifically the questions they're asking, and send in your responses. You've got till the 4th of September to get your points across. They've basically broken the changes or the proposed changes down into 3 phases. So you can read that on the document. It's page 58 and 59. But basically, phase 1, they're looking at going towards the end of this year, start of next year. So that's, as I understand it, that's some of the changes involving the power increase to the licenses. Then they're going to gradually start phasing out the 2E0s, I think, and issuing the M8s. And that's going to happen over phases 2 and 3. So phase 2, they're looking 2024, and phase 3 currently sometime around the end of 2024, 2025 is what they're saying. Now, whether or not that will get pushed back, like I say, at the moment, this is in consultation, and things have a habit of changing with consultations. So what we're talking about today could ultimately, if you're watching the live stream on replay 2, 3, 4 years down the line, some of what we've talked about today might not actually have come into force. We don't know. It's that's the nature of a consultation. It could change. So I'll go back to what I said at the very beginning of the live stream. Do not take what we've said today as legal advice, because you need to know what the conditions of your license say, and what we're saying now could change or be completely wrong several years down the line. So quick disclaimer.
I'm just wondering if is there anything that anyone feels so passionately about that we should not put in place with, from these proposals out there? So against it, very against it, or are we just all happy that we're just going to let them all go through?
The only annoyance for me, I think, is I really kind of wanted to hold on to the 2E0 call sign I've got, just because it's my initials. It's a little bit of sentimental value there. I wouldn't be too upset about losing the foundation. I understand why they've done it, and yeah, the argument is you only need one call sign, and as Jonathan said earlier, it's people see it as their call sign, but actually it's just a call sign that you've been issued with your license. It's not actually yours. But I think that's the only thing that I would be a little bit peeved about. I think everything else, I actually think, largely speaking, overall, I'd say that it's actually really positive change for the hobby. I think it clarifies things. I think it gives us greater freedoms that we've been asking for a long time. So overall, I would say it's actually a really good thing.
I'd agree with that. I don't think there's anything for me in this proposal that I am gonna, nothing's the hill that I'm going to die on. There are a few things that I think possibly need more clarification. Regional secondary locators, possibly something that I probably wouldn't touch, but I can understand reading the full document. And by the way, if you haven't read the full document, do. But reading the document, basically Ofcom is saying that there's no regulatory need for us to put this in the license, which I kind of get. So I can understand everything that Ofcom have done here. There's nothing that is the hill I'm going to die on. There are things that I think I will suggest might be tweaked when I reply to the consultation. But I think everything in it is probably fundamentally good. And I think I've seen a lot of the video that I published for the summary, which I was very conscious of the fact that I didn't put my opinion in. It was just the summary of the facts.
And really good video, by the way. I think, if I remember rightly, I've put a link to your video in the comments below.
Thank you.
For anyone watching this who hasn't seen that video, it's a really good summary of everything we've talked about tonight. So definitely worth watching.
Thank you. And it's only about 5 minutes long as well. So I was impressed with myself. But I think that I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, what I want to say in the video is I didn't put my thoughts into it, but it generated quite a lot of discussion in the comments, as I'm sure you'd imagine. And there are some people that I seem to get the impression of they were against it because it was change, and change is change, and change is bad. And actually, that's not the case here. Yes, it's change, but actually it's change bringing the hobby up to date and trying to future-proof it, as we said at the very start. And this is, I think, a good thing. And it's a good thing that Ofcom are actually putting effort and money and time into amateur radio for once. And I think that can only be a good thing. But it's important that each and every one of us replies to the consultation and either voices our support for it or says why we personally feel that's not the right thing to do. But it's down to each of us to make that decision. I know that the RSGB are working on their own guidance in terms of what they would like. And and I'm waiting for to do my response until they have done that, so I can read what their view on it is. But it's only their guidance. You don't have to put verbatim what they put. And I think the ICQ podcast did an interview with a few of the guys from the RSGB at the Friedrichshafen show last week. And the view of the RSGB is we will have guidance, but it's your decision. You have got to make your own mind up on whether this is the right thing for the licensing framework. And that's what's got to happen. We've all got to make our own decision. And based upon what we say, Ofcom will make the final decision.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a really good summary. I'm just a quick look through the comments. So Stu says, I'm still pinching myself that the power limits are going up. Never expected that in a million years. Yeah, I think that's the big highlight. I like the fact that we've been given the option for that. I know there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, I can't see, I can't see the point. I don't know why you'd need it." But I think it's about, if there's no regulatory reason why we can't have that, then why not? Give people the option. Not everyone's going to take it. There'll be a lot of people who won't take it. So, I think that's probably the big highlight that I think is actually a good thing. And someone else, I can't find the comment now, but someone else said they thought the opening up remote operation to foundations and intermediates was a really good thing, which, again, I think that's absolutely brilliant. I think that's
I can see us keeping RSLs. I think we're so used to them. We're 4 nations. We are one country, but we're 4 nations within that. You've probably got a lot of proud Welshmen and Scotsmen and Northern Irish folk, and I think for that reason alone, that doesn't bother me. But I think for that reason alone. But for me, I want to keep the RSL so people know where I'm coming from, which nation of the United Kingdom I'm operating from, and I think a lot of people will think like that. And my prediction is we'll keep RSLs.
Yeah, I do wonder on the politics on that. I mean, from my perspective, I'd quite like to be able to drop having to use the W when I go over the border, so I can just keep one log, because there are times, and you've seen it in my videos, there've been times when I've inadvertently wrongly identified my station with the wrong call. I've got mixed up. So to me, I'd quite like to be able to drop that W. I mean, it remains, under the proposal, it remains optional, so people who want to can continue to use it. But I like the option of not having to use it. But as you say, Fraser, I don't know if they might keep it as compulsory.
That's honestly the reason why, over the last couple of years, Ofcom have allowed us to use the special RSLs, that's just finished, hasn't it? For the Q went for the and all of those. I never went for them because they were nationwide in the same way like the GB prefix on special event call signs is. There's no way to easily identify which nation in the country that station is in. And that's the reason that I never bothered with the R for the coronation or the Q for the Queen's things last year. So because of that. So I think that was the precursor to actually this coming in. It's like making RSLs optional. I think this probably, regardless of what we put in I'm going to be controversial now. I think regardless of what we say, this is going to happen. I think it's going to be down to organizations such as the RSGB and others to highly encourage the continued use of them. It'd be much in the same way that band plans, for instance, there's nothing legally that says that 14230 is the SSTV frequency and that you can't use SSB on it. There's nothing that
people do, to be fair.
And there is, but there's nothing that legally sets down that as being the case. It's in the band plan, but the band plan is a gentleman's agreement at best. So I think this is going to be pretty much what we're going to be looking at with RSLs. It's going to be a gentleman's agreement that we do it, but it's not going to be legally enforceable.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning, I said at the very beginning of this live stream, I think it's more a case of not if this comes in, but when. I think it is going to happen. It's how much can we affect any changes that we want to through the consultation period. And I think if there's things we're not happy about, we need to make our voices known. But as I said, I put my cards on the table. I don't think there's anything on this that's really got my blood boiling. Overall, I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah, me too.
Chris, anything you're really not happy about?
I'm saying with you, James. It doesn't affect me really. They're not taking anything away from us, are they? Really, they're
That's
not
the
taking
big thing. That's
for us
the
to
big
sort
thing.
of dig in and kick up a stink and make a noise. They're not taking anything away from us. I don't think it's a bad thing really. Bringing it up to date, really.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
Okay. Well, with that, guys, I mean, we've been going an hour and 50 minutes, so we've done almost 2 hours. Jonathan, I know you were saying you haven't had your dinner yet, so
I haven't. I'm Hank Marvin.
you must be starving.
Yeah,
so I think with that we've pretty much exhausted the list of points that I wanted to go through. Again, in the comment in the description, Jonathan's video sums it up really nicely. So do check out that video, and big thank you to all of the guys for joining me on the live stream tonight. We've got
Great
Chris
discussion.
M0RSF. Thanks to the other Chris who had to disappear off. Big thank you to Jonathan who's joined us on this one, and also Fraser. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks very much, James.
Cheers,
And
guys.
a big thank you to all of our viewers as well. Thanks a lot, folks. 7 3s.